And just like that, we have completed our 3 panel sessions, but I'm happy to say the conversation does not end here. In our final time together today, we are excited to invite some of our panelists back to a roundtable discussion to go over all your practical implementation questions on workplace wellness. During registration, you were able to write in your burning implementation questions. We're so grateful for all of the submissions we received, and we'll use this time to go over some of the larger themes of questions we were able to assemble. Remember, you are more than welcome to add any new questions or thoughts that have come up throughout the day in the Feed Loop chat. I'm happy to reintroduce Todd Humber from Northwall Media, who will be moderating this discussion. He'll be joined by our panelist, Dr. Susan Peters from Harvard University, Nicolette Gowan, an occupational therapist and president and CEO of Gowan Consulting, Dr. Clare Kelliher from Cranfield School of Management, and again, Andrew Barnes, founder of the 4-Day Week Global. With that, I'll pass the word to Todd to start the conversation.
Thank you, Emma. It's good to be back. And I agree, it's been a fantastic day of sessions. So I have a long list of questions. This is not a shy audience. Obviously, we've got some great questions that have come in through the course of the day and even during the pre-registration portion of this. So I'm just going to start and I'm going to kind of toss them around and to all the panelists on the line. If you want to chime in and I didn't ask you, please do. Please speak up. So this first one, Andrew, it's going to come your way. We're going to stick with the 4-day work week. So here's the question. I mentioned the idea of a 4-day work week to combat turnover issues we were having and was met with blank stares and eye rolls. Do you think the 4-day work week will ever become a normal benefit, or is it always going to be a gimmicky outlier?
Well, it's no longer a gimmicky outlier, Todd. I think that's very clear. This has actually gone very mainstream, especially in Europe. You're getting country after country actually passing legislation on this. You're seeing it getting to high levels of participation, or interestingly high levels of participation in countries like Japan. The real issue here is that all the evidence suggests that if you need to attract and retain talent, a 4-day week is very helpful. One of our participants in the United States saw a 289% increase in applicants. Ourselves, we're the dullest company in New Zealand. We're a trust company, right? You know, wake up in the morning wanting to work for a trust company. We've seen a substantial improvement in the number of applicants. And what you're also seeing is turnover levels drop. And that's a consistent piece of data, again, right the way across the participants in the 4-day week trials. It is now the #1 reason in the United States for introducing a 4-day week: attraction, retention of staff.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, our next question here. How do you convince employers to create a workplace wellness program if they are a small business owner and cannot participate due to financial hardship? I'm not sure who I should, maybe I'll start with you, Susan, on that one.
My biggest suggestion would be to start small and to engage the people within the organization that are already passionate about that, so you can really build on that momentum. Work wellness initiatives don't have to be expensive. I think the key is building them into existing structures that already exist. So if you have structures that work really well within the organization, you have a health and safety committee already in place, and you've got people that are passionate about this, bring them together so that they can talk about this openly. I think, you know, there are some benefits to implementing these initiatives in a small organization. Often you have fewer gatekeepers to get through, to get access to the resources that you need, which can be easier sometimes. I've implemented these types of approaches through some of my research in small companies, and often the key people that make decisions are at that table because it's a small leadership team, and the owner of the organization is often sitting at that at the table. I think, you know, sometimes these small employers think that it is challenging to put it in place. And it can be if you're relying on an external supports to really help you through this. But there are a number of different, organizations that do provide this kind of technical assistance. Like we at the Harvard Center, we have an outreach call. We've helped companies do this stuff, and we've pointed them in the right direction so that they can get resources or kind of go to places. So like the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health have a total worker health program where there's lots of resources for companies on those pages and ways to help, you know, small organizations start to think about this stuff.
Wonderful. Thanks, Susan. Just look, anyone else has anything to chime in. So Nicolette, I'm going to put you on the spot for this next one. This looks like it's kind of maybe coming from the employee side or not management anyway. How do you ask your employer to implement workplace wellness? How do you first start that conversation to try to get them to make that investment?
That's a good question. And I think of the things that Vanessa was talking about around disclosure and how to approach an employer. And I think it's looking at who in the organization you feel most comfortable opening up about that. As Susan just mentioned, are there individuals in the organization that have already promoted or been open about wellness or mental health initiatives, or maybe it's mindfulness, and get those people's buy-in to be able to kind of approach that. I know in our organization, and I'll speak kind of to the last question as well, because we are a small organization. So exactly what Susan said, the more people that you have to share that voice, the more likely it is that employers will listen. And then employers don't see it as much of an input of time, because that's one of the concerns of me being a CEO and a business owner of a small organization. I love to offer wellness initiatives such as mindfulness. We do wellness challenges, but I don't have the time necessarily to run that. So when you have a group that says, I want to run with this, I want to implement it, this is what I'm thinking. And really, it's just, can we take 10 minutes on Wednesdays and Fridays and do mindfulness together, or whatever that looks like. So I would suggest that employee to come with suggestions, to come with a group to support that, and to come with a plan of how that will work. I think we're past the point of employers seeing the benefit of workplace wellness and these initiatives. I think it's pretty obvious, and that if employers speak return on investment, we see return on investment in these programs. So I would say, yeah, getting a group of people together and coming with suggestions, actions, and plans.
Thank you, Nicolette. Bit of a theme in these questions, actually. This one, I'm going to assume this one came from a consultant. And maybe Claire, I'll direct this one to you. What steps can I take to help employers understand that they need to make changes to help with work burnout?
In relation to, sorry, did you say burnout?
Yes, burnout. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think this, issue of people working in an always-on culture is, clearly something that contributes towards burnout. I think, there are some important interventions that need to be introduced in organisations, perhaps through changing a culture about the way in which people work. We've done some work on this in organisations, particularly perhaps in the kind of professional services environment, where you often have people who, have a strong career motivation, strong desire to achieve, and want to engage with their work on an ongoing basis. But when, there are communications, whether that be through emails or through WhatsApps or whatever, taking place almost 24/7, particularly in a global organization where colleagues may be in different environments, I think, it's really important to establish protocols, if you like, about how people protect their time. It goes back to this idea of need for recovery from work in order to prevent burnout and similar kind of symptoms. So to be able to establish some protocols around that, so that people don't feel that, a whole conversation might have taken place if they're not engaging in those communications in out of hours. And so to being able to contain work in many senses and making it okay to do so, rather than people feeling that, you know, well, if I don't, other people will be engaging, and as a result, somehow missing out, being out of the conversation, decisions being made, things being finalized without their input to do so. So I think that, you know, it's more than a culture. I think in some senses, I think there does need to be interventions. You know, there's some really easy things with sending emails at a time that might be convenient to an individual, but using a delayed send. And, you know, so infrequently in many ways is that actually used. But you know, it's very easy to do, but not used sufficiently, not promoted as a way of protecting others' time.
Wonderful. Thanks, Claire. I'm going to go to our live chat now. We just had a question come in, and it's for anyone. So anyone can jump in here, so everyone be ready. It's about mental health. So would any of the panelists share their most preferred or reliable leading indicators for evaluating the psychological health and safety of workplaces? Who wants to go?
I can jump in here. So I guess it depends on how you want to measure this, whether you want to use existing data that you are already collecting with you in your organization, or whether you're planning to do something in addition. So for example, do you have a worker survey that you're building into? And there's lots of different instruments out there that measure things like health and safety, climate, psychological safety. Amy Edmondson at the Harvard Business School has developed a really short instrument that measures that. I've been leading an initiative to develop a measure that measures thriving from work, which is a work wellbeing instrument that measures worker wellbeing across 6 different dimensions, as well as a checklist to kind of check the worker wellbeing health of your organization and some of those indicators that contribute to better wellbeing or contribute towards thriving workers. So there's a bunch of different instruments out there. Sometimes it's just hard to know how to get your hands on them because often they live in that academic kind of sphere. Gallup and McKinsey use a lot of different instruments and kind of, you know, partner with organizations, and often you can't get your hands on those. But the ones that are kind of publicly available are the ones like Amy's developed at the Harvard Business School that I've developed. We often link those on our websites. So it's hard to kind of connect that sometimes. And I don't have any great ideas to kind of get that out there, rather than me kind of being at these kind of sessions where I can kind of, you know, tell you that they actually do exist, and that we're happy to share them with you once we've developed them.
Great, thanks, Susan. It's a big topic. I don't know, Andrew, Claire, and Nicolette, if you have ideas about, you know, what to look for when you're trying to gauge psychological safety.
What we found on ours is that we have obviously a couple of things. We're running the global research projects, which is running on the back of all the pilots that we're running, and that has some data in there with regard to employee well-being, on the basis that, you know, starting point for the 4-day week is this concept that 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of the workforce at some point in time will have a stress or mental health issue. So what we start to get from ours is some of this, and again, I sort of agree with Susan. It's a little at the periphery sometimes, but employee well-being, self-assessed well-being statistics sort of drop out of this. And our research, the first batch of this from the US and Ireland pilots, will come out very shortly, and then followed by the big one from the UK and then Australia and New Zealand. So we'll be sharing that data, but it isn't going to be out, I would suggest, really in depth until February next year.
Nicolette, looks like you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add for those in Canada, there is the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in Canada that outlines the 13 risk factors for a psychological health and safe organization. And one that we use often when we do consultation work with organizations when looking at a mental health strategy is the Guarding Minds at Work assessment and survey, which has been put together by Canada Life. So it has a lot of kind of assessment tools, looks at psychologically safe leadership as well. And what we do is we use that data to be able to suggest really good changes to the workplace aligning with what the employees are reporting, as well as employers, and education around that as well. So we really like to use that one.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next question. Actually, I think we're going to stay with you, Nicolette, because I believe this one's up your alley. What's your perspective? This is about doctor's notes on having employers request a medical note for flexibility with work.
I think it depends on your policy. I think that you set the stage based on what you allow in terms of flexible working. And if you presented it in a way where employees need medical accommodations to be flexible in the way that they work, then that's what they're going to perceive. They're going to see that as this needs to be a medical accommodation, or this needs to be a parental accommodation or family accommodation. Whereas my recommendation is, how can you offer that flexibility? You can put guidelines around what that looks like, but how can we look at supporting humans as humans and understanding that people have different roles in their life that are important? So if you need or you want to attend your son's baseball game, great, go be a mother and come back. And some organizations might say, make up the time, or as Andrew talking about the 4-day work week, well, that allows you to live that role of your life. And so maybe in the end, that's going to make you more productive when you come back. So I think that really kind of setting the stage to allow for that flexibility and allow people to be their human selves is the best way to go about that, I would say. And you can put guidelines around that, what that looks like. If you want to take that hour off to go to your baseball game, well, that's then you have to make up the hour if that's your choice or prerogative.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to come in and say, you know, we need to move beyond of seeing flexibility as something which, you know, is solving difficult issues of, you know, it's a way of accommodating somebody with a problem. You know, we need to think about it in a much more positive sense in terms of allowing people to combine work and non-work activities and, you know, the benefits associated with that. I think, you know, something which, of course, there may well be people who need flexibility for health-related reasons, but I think we need to move beyond it, you know, as a means of accommodating a problem, whatever that problem might be, health or caring commitments or whatever. So it needs to be seen in a much more positive light because the evidence shows there are real benefits for organizations and for individuals from allowing greater flexibility.
For sure. And if I think back to our conversation this morning, just around the labor market challenges, I think employers, they're not going to be able to be that picky, right? They have to be flexible. They have to let people be, as you said, you know, their human self. So maybe we'll move on to the next question. This one here, it's a big one again. This is really about, you know, the importance of leadership and getting senior leadership on board. So the way this question is worded is, how can we help leaders genuinely care about employee well-being? And maybe Susan or Andrew, we'll start with you.
I think I would say use data, use success stories, case studies, you know, to really kind of make that argument. Andrew, you probably have a little bit of to think about this as well. You've probably made this argument before.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, look, I mean, this has absolutely underpinned the whole of the philosophy around 4-day week global. You know, I have spent the last 4 years with people telling me that this couldn't work in their company, their industry, their department, their anything. And so our whole approach, my whole approach, and I preface my talk by saying I always feel a fraud in being well-being conferences, because I came from the position of productivity. How do you improve productivity? Now, it's pretty hard for a board, a chief executive, a leader to argue that you're not going to have these sort of policies in place when all the evidence, and this is why we're doing these big trials around the world where company after company comes out and says, and this is the economic impact of us implementing a 4-day week. Our productivity has gone up 25%. Our turnover rates have dropped 10%. Our absenteeism has halved. You know, what is it you want to do? You want to have a worse company than that? And if and if that's the argument that you're running, it is pretty hard for a leader, of shareholders or a board to argue against that, because the evidence is now overwhelming. And actually, you know, let's think about this. You know, let's go out on a limb. Healthy, happy, engaged staff are more productive. Oh, gosh, never thought of that. So that's part of this story, is to make it safe for business leaders to go. It's a no-brainer.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Next question, I think, Claire, I'll start with you on this one. This is about working with different generations. So the way this question is worded, work schedule accommodations for older workers. Is this a new thing? And knowing that there are worker shortages, might this help keep older workers in the workforce for longer?
Absolutely. Thank you for batting that one in my direction. I mean, in many senses, it isn't necessarily a new thing, but I think it is something which is very important in the context of labour shortages. I think our work around part-time work particularly offers opportunities, particularly for older workers who are in a position perhaps to choose as to whether or not they want to continue working. In the UK, certainly, we have quite a lot of people in the category of being economically inactive, i.e. they're not working and not looking for work. And one of the things we're talking to government departments about at the moment is how to attract those people back into work. And the research that we've done on part-time working and what employers have learnt about it through the experiences of accessing government support during the pandemic, of creating part-time jobs which are perhaps attractive to older workers, things that particularly where it's quality jobs rather than perhaps just low skill level jobs, people who perhaps have been in higher skill level work may be attracted to come back in on a part-time basis, but who wouldn't want to take on full-time working again. I think it also applies to older workers who may suffer from ill health, that they may not be able to work on a full-time basis, but might be able to participate on a part-time basis. And so I think thinking about how we can create opportunities, employers can create opportunities to attract people either to stay in the workplace or to attract people who have have left the workplace, but to bring them back in. And I think in those economies where the cost of living crisis is biting strongly, there is also that motivation for older workers to be looking for additional opportunities to supplement their income.
Great, thank you so much for that. Next question. Again, I'm not sure who best to field this one, so I'll throw it at all of you, but this is really just someone asking about how can they approach, or what's the best way to approach an employee who appears that they may not be well in the workplace? Thoughts on how you have that first conversation with someone?
I can take that one.
Great,
this is a lot of what we do and a lot of what we are training managers and leaders to do. So if anyone was able to join the session earlier, I gave some tips and suggestions and even a framework of how to approach the conversation. And I guess the first thing you start with is noticing, like, why are you having that conversation? What did you notice in the change? So was it a change in their behavior? Was it a change in performance? Were they missing deadlines? So being really objective and knowing or identifying, which is the first step, why you're going into that conversation. So what are those actions or objective things that you recognized so that you can have that conversation? And it's really setting the stage as well when you're in the conversation to let people know how valued they are. You always want to start a conversation with, we really appreciate the work that you've been doing, and we're coming from this genuine place of caring, because that's how we are genuine, I guess, is by showing how much we care and how much we value employees, and then opening the space to let them talk. So once you present kind of what you've noticed, it's, are you okay? Do you need anything to be supported? And then you listen. And the biggest skill as a leader in that position is to listen, because employees oftentimes just need to be heard, and then you can help them to find what they need to be supported. Is it accommodations in the workplace, adjustments to your work, more flexibility, changes in the work tasks temporarily, or do you need communication in a different way? And then kind of setting a plan for the employee to have a plan of what they can do to move forward from there. So we always see the first line is staying at work, and how can they be supported to stay at work, and then how do you follow up with that conversation? So it's definitely difficult, it's definitely complex, but always going in with that goal in mind, and that ear, empathy, attention, and respect.
I think, you know, everything that Nicolette said is, you know, spot on. And I'd just like to add that I think, you know, we need to make sure in these situations that our managers feel equipped to be able to have those conversations, and that we're providing them with the resources and the support to go in and have those conversations with their employees or the workers that they manage. But also that they have the resources to direct them in the right direction if they learn something or uncover something that really does need attention, whether that's an EAP service within the organization or other resources. So I think, you know, middle managers are often in this kind of difficult situation where often they don't ask because they don't think it's their place, or they don't feel like they're equipped to have those conversations. So ensuring that the middle managers have those supports in place, the resources, the skills, to be able to have the conversations like Nicolette said.
Great, thanks for that, Susan. We're almost out of time, but I'm going to throw one more question at you, and it's going to come to each of you, so be prepared. Essentially, I just want to know from either from your own session that you gave or a session that you listened to today, what's the one thing you heard that you think is the most important thing for attendees to take away today, right? So just kind of think about that either one takeaway that you got, it can be from your own presentation, that's fine, or something that you heard. So, and Andrew, you're first up on my screen here. So I'm going to put you on the spot and just ask you to go ahead.
Well, it's something that Claire said, and it's a thing that we talk about quite a bit. It is, again, it comes back to a Henry Ford quote, you know, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. And a lot of the stuff about, you know, flexible working and all of this stuff, you know, if you convince yourself that you can't do it, guess what? You won't do it. And it doesn't matter what policy you put in place. It doesn't matter whether it's a 4-day week, it's flexible working, whatever it is. If you really don't believe it, you will absolutely be able to prove to your own satisfaction that this is a stupid idea. But actually, if you give it a chance, if you actually think you can, you'll probably surprise yourself that you can. And the rewards are consequently are fantastic.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andrew. Claire.
I think this really comes back from Andrew's talk and is in some ways related to the comment that Andrew's just made, is about having courage, about organizations having courage to do things differently. Andrew, you made the comment at the beginning of yours saying, you know, it seemed like a weird idea in some senses, but you went with it. And, you know, the evidence is there both in your own organization, but in the various pilots that have been used elsewhere, that this pays dividend. And I think, you know, being prepared to take your courage in both hands and do something that you think, you know, this is going to make a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. And Nicolette.
I see this as a theme that kind of crossed a few sessions today, probably all 3 of the sessions, is that well-being is individualized and has a lot of layers to it. So Susan talked about all of the different layers and dimensions that go into this experience of well-being and the workplace. And also the I don't know if anyone touched on this, but we talked about it in our prep for our session. And it's the concept of a safe workplace, and what does that mean? And it's really hard to, as a leader, take all the responsibility on creating that safe workplace, because to each individual it looks different. You can't define an organization or a subjective feeling of safety and say that everyone's going to feel the same way. So what comes to mind when I say individualized, as well as even Andrew having with the 4-week work policy, you can opt in. Some people aren't going to work better that way. And some people are going to need choices and different support. So I think my biggest takeaway and one of the most important things is that our supports, our adjustments, and our approaches may be individualized to each person.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Susan.
So my biggest takeaway is that the time is ripe for this kind of approach. You know, we a lot of us that you've heard from today, we've been talking about this long before the pandemic happened. But during the pandemic, a lot of this stuff really came to the forefront. And now we're in this really important phase where we need to kind of grasp that opportunity and really use it for, you know, really take it there. And so that's my biggest takeaway, is not to wait, These approaches can be implemented. You can start small and think about it, really identify the champions within your own organization and start to think about how you can actually improve the well-being of your workers. And you'll see the benefits that you'll be able to have within the workforce, within the productivity of the organization, but some of the knock-on effects. So if you improve the well-being of the workers, you're probably going to improve the well-being of their families and the communities in which they reside. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, is don't wait, do it now.
Wonderful. Thanks, Susan. And I went over time slightly, but Emma, I'll hand it back to you. And it's your fault for putting together such a great panel. It was hard to stick to the time.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And what a fantastic discussion. It was wonderful to hear from you all throughout the day and to gather you here again. For me, it sounds like, as Susan says, the time is ripe. So I hope everyone in our audience is feeling a bit more prepared to implement work wellness practices in their workplaces. Before we wrap up today, I would like to invite our Vice President, Camila Caroli, again to share some closing remarks.
Thanks, Emma. Wow, thank you again. Just as an aside, the Work Wellness Institute is excited about the pilot that starts with us this month as part of the 4-day week global as a participant and partner. So from reading the comments along the edge of this conference, I know that I'm not the only one who gained a lot of valuable knowledge and food for thought from these sessions, and the very tangible takeaway actions as employers, employees, and advocates we can commit to start implementing today. A success in turning emerging thoughts, ideas, and research into practice. A huge thank you to our presenters and moderators. We recognize your time and the deep value of your expertise, perspectives you've brought to these discussions. And a big thank you again to our incredible Work Wellness Institute team for the work, dedication, and immense planning that went into putting on this conference and the attention to detail. I very much appreciated the headspace meditation during the break while I ate my son's Halloween candy. The Work Wellness Institute conference series, we described how we, before how we came up with it to navigate this time, but really is a call to action to bring intentional focus to the kinds of workplaces we want to create today for tomorrow. And everyone has a role to play in building this culture that leverages diverse points of views, elicits new insights as it creates sustainable value for organizations. This also requires a commitment to understanding and removing systemic barriers that remain too high for too many people. A shift that recognizes that the value of that individual's contribution to the performance of the workplace and the tools required to remove the barriers to employment and opportunity that get in the way again of too many individuals' ability to fully do so, to fully contribute. The global pandemic, as we know, presented us with unprecedented challenges, and through it, we have adapted through knowledge sharing and collaboration, yet it bared inequalities for our workplaces, exposing vulnerability to disruption, and really that need, that call to action to create workplaces that support their people. Because as Andrew kept referring to, if you support your people, there's a great, productivity bonus at the end of that. Today, we explored practical frameworks and toolkits that we can use to measure workplace well-being, from conception to implementation, as well as that socioeconomic urgency to create healthy, inclusive workplaces that recognize the essential contribution of an untapped labor market and all their intersections. We are challenged to define and address the barriers to employment and opportunity for these populations, and this requires us to challenge existing practices, policies, processes, and biases, and a real collaborative action we can take as leaders, managers, and individuals. We gained a deeper understanding of the significant impact of stress and burnout. It is real, and it's having significant consequences on individual employees, teams, and organizational resilience and performance. We also gain tools as employers and employees as we begin to recognize burnout and the existing hurdles and stigma to disclosure. And finally, we just ended with looked at flexible work policies as creative ways of incentivizing and retaining employees. The barriers that might need to be considered through the great questions that you've all submitted, and the tangible takeaways and data of how to implement these practices to support workplace wellness and organizational performance. Again, we are looking forward as an organization to be participating in the partnership with the 4-Day Week Global as part of a program trial starting this month. Through this conference, we have been given an opportunity to examine how we define work wellness and build inclusive, resilient, and performing work environments. Diversity is key. And to move forward, organizations must consider how an active commitment to redefining wellness practices can positively impact employees in their workplaces. So I want to thank you all for coming. Great big shout out to our speakers, moderators, and the amazing Work Wellness Institute team. I'll pass it back to Emma for final details and next steps. And thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Camila. As we've reached our time together today, our website is the best place to continue your learning. On our website, you will get direct access to our eCampus, where all of today's panels, recordings, and slides will be posted, as well as recorded webinars, self-paced and instructor-led courses. You can even check out the resource section to see blog posts, the Work Wellness Institute portal, infographics, thoughts to inspire, and more. And remember to download our Workistic app in the Apple Store or Google Play Store. In the app, you'll discover new short style resources through interviews, summaries, and research findings. And one lucky winner will be randomly selected from those who download the app today to win a 1-year individual membership with unlimited certificates. But before we part for today, please remember to fill out the session survey, which again, you will find in the description of each panel. You will also receive an email from FeedLoop with an invitation to fill out a survey for the entire conference. Now, please take the time to fill this out so that we can keep working towards delivering relevant, timely, and engaging learning opportunities for you all. But with that, I would like to send a sincere and huge thank you to you all for joining today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, thank you.